He'll be back on Sunday, Lord willing, to get us going in chapter 11. So we're talking about holding fast tonight. And so as we usually do, we have a brief review of some of the points from previous. The main point is we have a high priest. Where is he sitting? Just anywhere? No, he's at the right hand of God. And the first covenant had a sanctuary, but Christ, our high priest, right, has entered through a greater and a more perfect, if you will, temple or into a better sanctuary, heaven. The new system is based on a New Testament. Remember, we talked about the covenant and the testament language, founded on the death of Christ that provides a much better inheritance. And then Jesus will be here a second time, but it's not to go to the cross again. It's coming the second time for our salvation for those who eagerly, not from a lazily perspective, not await him, but eagerly as we finished the last time. So got everybody sort of settled in here good. So we will have our prayer as we get going. Will you pray with me? Our gracious God, how wonderful it is that you've seen fit to preserve this day just for us. You made it for us. And though we long to be with you, help us to take advantage of this time to learn more about you. And as we do, as we study Hebrews, that we will be encouraged, we will hold fast, we will lift each other up, we'll do all the things that we need to do to help everybody get to heaven. Our Heavenly Father, do not let us quit, do not let us grow weary, help us and encourage us. Just as Christ did, as he made it through and he is sitting at your right hand, help us to want to be there so bad that we will do all that we can do to get to heaven. Of course, through you, but we ask our Heavenly Father that we don't faint, just like the Hebrew writer is talking to the people approximately 2,000 years ago. Take care of us, bless us, and forgive us, for it's in Christ's name. Amen. All right, as we get started tonight, so the rest of Hebrews, or rest of chapter 10 is just a warning. There's been a real, there's been several warnings come along, and in this one, the last one I think was in chapter 5 to 6, but in this one, it's the whole rest of chapter 10. So that's sort of what we're talking about, and it's broken up into three broad parts. So the structure tonight will be three broad parts. There's going to be a positive, a negative, a positive, an encouragement, a willful sinning, and a confidence. That's sort of how it's broken down as we roll through the chapter, the rest of the chapter tonight. So if we start looking at encouragement, there's two parts as we start here in 19, verse 19. And there's two questions that we're going to try to answer. Where do we want to be? And number two, what do we have? Where do we want to be, and what do we have? So let's read here in chapter 10, verse 19 and 20. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way which he inaugurated for us through the veil, that is, through his flesh. So the first question is, where do we want to be? You ask about anybody. I don't care what their religious affiliation is. You could talk about Jews, Muslims, whatever. Where do they want to be? They want to be in heaven. They want to be with God, whatever their religious ideas would have that be. So that's where we want to be. And what we're talking about here is in the context of, but in the old system, is that where you really are? Well, you're in the Holy of Holies, so it's close. But you're really not in heaven, right? You're not in heaven. You're not with God. And so with that being said, really the system has failed you. One person, once a year, for 2 to 3 minutes, goes into the Holy of Holies. And that's it. Nobody else. No one else goes. But what about the new system? What about the new system that the speaker's been talking about the whole time? Well, let's check it out. Look at verse 19. It talks about brothers and sisters. Contrary to what people would even say today, I know it's shocking, but you're either a brother or you're a sister. There's no in between, nothing like that. You're one or the other. So if you're one or the other, that means everybody's going. Anytime. There's no way that It's 2:30 in the morning. No, you can pray to God. And I don't know if you've thought about this, but ladies, think about this. In the Old Covenant, how many women ever went into the Holy of Holies? None. 0. But notice what he talks about here. He says, brothers and sisters, ladies, you're welcome. So I think it's a wonderful comparison here where you look at the Old Covenant and the new covenant that's being established. Ladies are welcome. And I think that's a very interesting sort of a take on it. Now, so it also talks about the priest, how they went through the veil as opposed to, where do you want to be through the veil as opposed to the flesh? So he's saying there was a veil that people would go through prior. Here we get to go through how? Through Christ, right? Through Christ. And we go through Christ because it's his living flesh. It's not a dead priest. So summing up, we can go into, from a new covenant perspective, into the Holy of Holies, but you can. It's so much better. And so secondly, in 21, we kind of follow up and it says, and since we have a great priest over the house of God. So what do we have? A great priest, right? So we're with God, we're with brothers and sisters, and we're with a great high priest. It doesn't even say better this time. It's a great high priest. And I have this concept of the total package, and you're like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, when you have this great high priest, that comes with a better system, a better law, a better covenant, a better sacrifice, a better blood, better results, better sanctuary, therefore a better destination. So it's the total package. We get it all. It's not like how it was during the old covenant, where it was just people dying, just spilling of blood. It wasn't over and over. It's once and for all. Notice it talks about a son as opposed to a servant. We talked about that, I think, in chapter 2 or 3 as we got going, because it was talking about Moses. So the question is, if we know where we want to be and we know how we're going to get there, what are we going to do if we don't quit? And that's a key right here. Well, there's 3 main points as we come through this part here. There's the approach, right? You'll see that as we go through the approach to God, right? To hold fast, we'll see that. What are we going to hold fast to? Our confession, and that's sort of the title, hold fast. And to encourage. We need to encourage one another, right? So if we go on to in the same chapter there, verse 22, let's look at what we have here. So remember my invitation a few weeks back, it was talking about Achan, how he sort of hid all the gold and the silver and I think there was a robe and stuff like that. And I talked about we shouldn't really be trying to hide or run from God, because that's just silly. He knows where we are anyway. You're just deluding yourself to think otherwise. But we need to run towards him. We need to approach him. That's what he's talking about. Run towards God, right? Don't run away from him. Don't quit on God. Run towards him. But, they've wanted to, the audience who's listening to this, what have they wanted to do? They wanted to run. Life of rejection, life of shame, I get it. It's hard. It's very difficult for these people. And I think we sometimes, miss that point. But he's saying, the writer's now saying, or the speaker probably, now is the time. If there's any time, the door's open. You can get to God through that great high priest. Now is the time. Now is the time to approach. So take advantage. It's here. It is now. Seize this opportunity. And I think there's another point. Don't run towards God all afraid or trembling and stuff. We definitely need to be reverent. You don't approach God being irreverent. But we need to come with confidence and boldness. Why? Because Christ did it for us. He's there with God. And I think when we look at Hebrews 4:16, maybe somebody can finish this for me. Let's approach the throne of grace with confidence. And what does he say here? He says the same thing. Full assurance of faith. So we need to approach with boldness. Don't come trembling. Come humble, come reverent, but come, as opposed to them running. And so as I was sort of looking through this, it made me think about a different sort of concept that we've talked before, and I came up with a question. So what kind of cleansing is mentioned in verse 22? When you read that, what kind of cleansing is that? Is that sort of an inside out or an outside in cleansing? And why do you think that? What are we seeing here? Is there any takers there, or anybody trying to answer that? I think we have Mary here.
I said that it's an inside cleansing. It's cleansing the heart of a guilty conscience, and then the physical act of baptism symbolizes that. I mean, it says something similar in 1 Peter 3:20 through 21, and the way I got it is, you're obeying the command to be baptized. When you do that, you're obeying the appeal of the gospel to your conscience. Like when people heard the gospel, they were cut to the heart, or they were pricked in the heart, and they either responded with anger and rejection, or fear and trembling and obedience, or various emotions.
Maybe we can, hello, there it's back. But it's got a red light. But anyway, so, yes, exactly. And I think the simple thing here is what you said, Mary. Think about this. Where's your heart? Thank you very much. We're going to make this work. All right. Thank you very much for all the help. Appreciate that. So it's talking about the sprinkles. And remember, we've already mentioned this back in Exodus. And notice what it says. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people. And he's being very accommodative, if you will, from that perspective, because he's saying, look, I understand. I know you know this. This is not anything new to you. And he's talking about the sprinkling from the perspective of when it was cleansing the temple. But notice what it says here. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it where? On the people. Did he sprinkle it in the people? So you can see that it's so much better, right? Just from that perspective. So as we continue on, another thing that's cleansed is what? What's cleansed? Cleansed from an evil conscience. Now, could the old law cleanse that? Well, clearly not. He couldn't cleanse it. No chance, right? And then, just like Mary said, I appreciate sort of the follow-up on the baptism. Once our hearts have been brought in tune with God's will, where we understand what God did for us, when we were sinners and God fulfilled that promise, and we have Tim here, and fulfilled that promise, guess what? Our heart's clean. Now we're ready to be baptized. Yes, Tim.
Okay, in answering the question, I'd like to also kind of piggyback on some of what Mary said. But, for years we've heard about the cup, that they were all concerned. Jesus pointed this out, that they were concerned about the cup, yes. But the cup was not clean on the inside. But it occurs to me that doesn't mean the inside of the cup and the outside of the cup that you can do without one or the other. And this comes out here too. I mean, and it's kind of like, I just remember a conversation years ago about wearing a coat and tie. And my dad felt like he was giving God his best by wearing a coat and a tie.
Yeah.
And he was told, see, that's just the external. And, you need to be concerned about the internal. That's what God's looking for. And my son was standing there and he goes, actually, God's concerned about both. And, so you don't want to leave out the part of our bodies washed with pure water either. I mean,
That's exactly right.
these are both pieces that are mentioned, and it's not downplayed here in this verse, and it's not downplayed the other way either. What was happening in the old law, there was something that was absent.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, or it could be. The potential was high for it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Yes, and it's exactly right. If you said, hey, I'm going to do, I'm going to make my heart right with God. I've heard people say that. But I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to do anything outward. Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing. So they took it back there. So anyway, all right, we'll get it figured out. So yes, so it's done both. We have it inside and then we go to outside. So it's an outside or inside outward cleansing. And so it's even better because our hearts are clean. We start off in a much better place from that perspective. And then we go on to the next slide. It's there in 23. Let's hold firmly. Look at what it says in 23. Let's hold firmly the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who has promised is faithful, okay? So once you have God, okay, so you're going to approach him, right? And once you have God, what are you going to do? Let him go? That doesn't make any sense. Hold on to him. Remember what happened with Abraham. He had a promise given to him, and what happened with him? It was fulfilled. It was fulfilled. And you guys are part of it, is sort of what he's talking about. And I think in the end, particularly here, he's talking about somebody's going to go to heaven. Okay? Somebody's going to go to heaven. Hold on and don't quit so that it'll be you. And that brings us kindly to our next little chunk here. So in 24, it talks about how to encourage, right? And let us consider how to encourage one another in love and good deeds, not abandoning our own meeting together, as the habit of some people, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. I think we sort of camp out like, oh, this tells us that, you've got to be at church all the time. And I think you sort of missed the point. Should you be at church all the time? Well, yeah, you should. But the reason that you come is very important. If you're coming to just to check a box and say, oh, somebody over here checked it off in the congregate thing, you're missing the point. You're missing the point here. And so I'd like us to consider, look at the people around here. Look around people. I see people, right? Are there people that are not here? Maybe they're sick. Maybe they're traveling. Maybe they're working, whatever it is. There's some people that are not here that we don't know. We don't know why. But that's probably a sort of a smaller percent. I would say that that's not the case where they're writing, who they're writing to, who this are speaking to. That these congregations, or this congregation, this group of people that's being written to, of 100 people, 70 or 80 or 100, or 70, 80, 90% of the people are gone. They don't come. They've forsaken the assembly. And so what he's talking about here is we understand that. They're very burdened. They're very burdened, just like we are. But here it's pretty tough. Rejection, shame, reproach, withdrawal, right? And they're ready to quit. They're ready to stop. But he says, that's the point of the assembly, to encourage, to lift up, to make people want to come. Okay, were there more trials coming up? We don't know that. Was it to be more difficult? We don't know that. We don't know that. But I would have to say that forsaking was much more severe there than it ever was that it'll be here. But it was tough at that time, very difficult. So I don't know if you need both. You'll probably turn it off. Okay. So with that being said, I think there's 2 points that I would like to just sort of highlight is for them, particularly for them, when we start talking about the assembly there, why were they told to go to assemble? I mean, where would they find true acceptance? At the assembly. Pardon me? Yeah, amongst their own people, the people that believe that. Why? Because, okay, so we have the Kegels over here, some Morton, the Weavers. So you guys, everybody goes into it and they see their own family, their own friends, their own coworkers and stuff like that. But what we have to understand is, that scared me. I don't know what it was.
The wire dropped out of it. Sure.
All right, well.
It's hanging off right here on the side.
I'm going to try to talk loud. That's what I'm going to try to do. All right, so, but I don't know if the people in the back can, or outside of this can hear me. So anyway, that being said, the same thing was happening for them, right? The same thing was happening for them. They would come to the assembly, and this is where they would be encouraged, because they were going through the same thing, just with different people, with different topics. And these are the people that would love them, that should love them, right? Now, the thing of it is, here, for us here, not there, not them, us. Question, are you going to heaven? I see some heads doing this. I see some people, yes, going to heaven. Question, the person to your right, is that person going to heaven? Person to the left, what about your children? What about your So what I'm talking about here is, it's not like I'm going to heaven and everything's great. We're supposed to encourage one another. We're supposed to help everybody get to heaven, right? That's the idea here. Did Jesus go to heaven and leave us behind? By no means. That's what the whole new covenant is about. And so that's what I was trying to sort of emphasize here is, let's keep encouraging everybody, just like they did. So, quick break. Dave, yes, super. I asked for a quick break and Dave's got his hand up. Nice coordination.
I see these verses 19 through 24 especially as the writer's reasoning with his readers. And these are things they know, but he's trying to get a response from them. Okay, and you see the word since twice in verse 19, since we have a confidence to enter the holy place. In 21, and since we have a great priest over the house of God. And then he uses the words, let us 3 times. Let us draw near with a true heart. Let us hold fast, and let us consider how to stir up one another. He's saying you've got all these reasons, right. Since God has provided, then respond in such a way that you understand what God has done. And that's why we have the assurance in verse 22. The whole purpose, I think, of mentioning the sprinkling and the cleansing is to give that assurance to what he said just before. Let us draw near with a true heart, full assurance of faith. Why? Because your hearts have been cleansed. You have been washed. And it's just that thoroughness that he's talking about. And so how do we respond to that? And that speaks to us too, not just, his Hebrew readers.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Trying to highlight that as we were coming out. How do you respond to these items? And that's true. He talks about we a lot, and I'll mention that a little bit later. He's not saying, oh, you guys. He's talking about we. Okay, Tim, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really, I must be sitting in the dead zone. What I was going to say is that when Dave was talking, it made me think of this. I want to live with confidence. And in this chapter, that's emphasized overall. Like, if you look at this chapter, I want to live in confidence. Well, okay, what am I going to do with that confidence? And what's that confidence based in? And that's in the knowledge of what Jesus has done for me, and Jesus being the center of everything. Okay, so I want to support community. I just need to tell you that I was going to forsake the assembly tonight. I really was. I even told Ann, I said, I'm not going. I just had a really bad day, and we say things like that sometimes in our house, and she was kind of surprised when I get ready to go. She goes, "Are you going?" I go, "Of course I'm going." What I told her is, I said, it goes both ways, right? Too many times I've come here when I didn't want to be here, and it's always been really good.
Yeah.
The answer to a bad day isn't to make it a worse day out of it.
Right.
And instead, you want to be encouraged. That's why you come here.
Yeah.
You come here to be encouraged and to encourage others. Because let's be honest, if we all didn't come tonight, who didn't feel like coming tonight, those who were here would go, wow, nobody's here.
Exactly.
It would just be very discouraging.
Discouraging.
And it's really kind of that simple talk is the application out of this. I know there's a much deeper thing going on with the Jews of this day, and Hebrews certainly brings all that out. But that's the practical application here, to me anyways. That just, I throw that in there.
Okay, I agree, and that's what I'm saying. That's not we're just talking to the Jews 2,000 years ago. I agree completely. I see these people here, so that encourages me. I can't think of a time, maybe I'm just special from that perspective. I come in the door, I feel good, or I don't feel good, I feel bad, or whatever, and I leave, and guess what? I feel better. Why? I see Scott Sario. I see Carol Lucasek. I see Brenda Weaver. I see Phil Story. You get the idea. I see these people. I see, oh, you wonderful people. How encouraging it is. Yes. One more question or comment, and then we got a motor. Thank you.
For people over the age of 50, being raised in the church, Hebrews 10:25 was the key verse for attendance that was hammered. And I grew up thinking that was the verse about attendance and that you would be a sinner, if you weren't here 3 times a week. At that time, it was 3 times a week. But I feel like we've really cheated ourselves by limiting it to that little bit. And you read the verses before and the responsibility that we have here to each other to lift up each other and encourage one another. And I didn't hear those parts growing up. So we need to make sure our kids hear the whole story.
Yes, I agree. So yeah, we just use that as you better be here, And the thing of it is if you come and you're mad or whatever, that's not helping anybody. You're supposed to be here to help. You're supposed to help Phyllis. We're supposed to help Rebecca. We're supposed to help Pence, So it's an encouraging kind of thing. So as we move along, good comments. I've got to really cruise along here. So willful sinning. So when we talk about willful sinning, there's no sin that's good. And if we see here in 26, for if we go on sinning willfully after receiving the knowledge of truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sin. So all sins are bad. All sins are bad. We get that. But what I'm saying is, if it's a willful sin, it's unexcusable. It cannot be forgiven. But number 3, what's really important, I think, is this sin is really bad because you're not trusting God. God's saying you are going to live. I promised way back to Abraham, you're going to live. You're choosing to ignore that. You know what to do, and you're choosing not to do that. And so I think when you start talking about this, we can see that all the way back with the Jews. You need to go into the promised land. We're going to be there. We're going to be. No. We're not going to the promised land. Don't you see those tall guys over there? They're pretty big guys. I'm not going over there. You didn't trust in me. Okay, I know what we'll do. Oh, the next morning. Oh, you said you'd be with us? Okay, let's go. And what happens? That didn't turn out so well, right? That didn't turn out so well. Matter of fact, they wanted to go back to Egypt along the way, right? They didn't go to the promised land. They died in the wilderness. But there was a remnant. There was a remnant. And he's telling them the same thing. He's saying, just like it was then, is just like it's going to be for you guys. The same thing. It's the same thing. You don't trust in God? You don't want to go to the promised land? Okay. You're going to go back to your Egypt. You're going back to Judaism, right? You don't want to go to heaven, evidently. So with that being said, he sort of tidies it up. I mean, the speakers called it like it is, willful sin. And so what he says is, there's no chance for you. I don't have a sacrifice for you. In the old law, guess what? Did the blood of the animals cover everything? No, not our conscience. We kept going back. Here's the same thing. If we willfully sin, even Christ can't cover that for us. So we have to trust him and keeping on, so to speak. But if you don't do that, 27 talks about, but a terrifying expectation of judgment and the fury of fire will consume the adversaries. So this is another question. I'm going to sort of motor through this because I got, with our, me trying out different hardware here, sort of took a little time. So if you look at 26, he talks about it says, at the end, it says, fire will devour your enemies. And so what I was trying to get at here is, who's the enemy now? The Hebrews, the people that he's talking about, the Jewish Christians, the people that he's talking to. You're making yourselves the enemies because you willfully sin. And if you willfully sin, what's God going to do with people that willfully sin? There's no hope for you. So what happens to the enemy? And as we turn into 28 here, what happens to the enemy? Anyone who has ignored the law of Moses is put to death without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Sounds pretty serious, right? Right? So what happens? Well, they're killed. Right? That's what it says. Put to death without mercy. Right? No trials, no delays, nothing like that. No lethal injection. No, none of that. You're executed. The point is, if you think it's bad now, under the old law, the new law will provide even a worse, if you will, a worse punishment. And we see that in 29 here, where it talks about how much more severe punishment do you think will he deserve who is trampled under the foot of Son of God and has regarded as unclean the blood of the covenant by which was sanctified, and has insulted the Spirit of grace, trampled under the God or Jesus under your foot. Can you imagine that? How do you think God feels? So a story about me. My grandfather, my parent, and my father were farmers, and so they were trying to get a cow up into the truck or the trailer to take it off to market. And I was the token guy to I was like 8 years old. I was just a little guy. So to get him up into the thing, well, the cow said, I don't know how it knew it, but it's like, that's not where I want to be. So the cow ran me over. It trampled me. I mean, bad. And so that made Dad mad. So Dad came over and checked on me and stuff like that. But fortunately, it didn't mess my head up. But it probably, you're probably like, I know why you're like you are now. No comments. But the thing of it is it made Dad mad. Why? Because his son was trampled underfoot. He got a tobacco stick, which is a stick about this thick, and he helped the cow along. He was not abusive, but he was much firmer. That's what's happening with God. You're not going to do that to Jesus and get away with it. It doesn't make any sense. And so as we go on down through here, he's talking about the punishment you're going to get is going to be unimaginable, and it's going to be from God. God knows how to punish. Why? He created us. And we see in 30, for we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And again, the Lord will judge his people. If you think this is bad, just wait before you come before me here in a little bit, and guess what? You'll find out how bad it really is. And he sort of concludes this point here in 31. Pretty good summary, I think. It is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. I don't know that I could say it better. The living God. This is not a God that's sitting over in the corner, just wasting away dead. No, this is a living God that has strength and knows. He knows what you're doing. And you'll be held accountable. So, fortunately, kind of like Dave was talking about, we have this third point. That's got to be pretty rough to hear from a Jewish perspective. But notice what he says here in 32. When we start considering our confidence. But remember the former days when, after being enlightened, you endured a great conflict of suffering. I think he's saying, I know, the speaker, I know you can do it. But probably what's more important is not only do I know, but I know you can do it. I can have all the confidence in you and in the world, but you have to have that same confidence. You have to have that. And so when we start thinking about that, I think he kind of illustrates that by the next few verses, right? If we look at 33, 33, being made a public spectacle through insults and distress, and partly by becoming companions with those who were so treated. It's not like you were hiding. You're not in a back alley. People know you're guilty. You know what you're guilty of? Being a Christian. And people know that. It's not hidden. And you're companions with these bad people. Why are you hanging out with these Christian people? That's the wrong crowd. Don't you know that? And that's the pressure they're feeling. But they notice what they did. They went through it. In 34, you showed sympathy to the prisoners, accepted joyfully the seizure of your property, knowing that you have for yourselves a better and lasting possession. This was a tough verse for me, just to be honest with you. Sympathy with the prisoners. Think about that. So if someone is in prison and we go there, that's not a big deal. But if I'm in prison and Tim comes to visit me, they're going to be putting eyes on Tim because you know what? I bet you Tim's in cahoots with him. He's got a wife. We're going to keep an eye on her. You get the idea. So that's sort of rough. And I think another thing is talking about taking your property. Anybody ever taken your property? Anybody lost their house? I'm not saying raise your hand, but that's rough. That's rough. But these people, they were coming in and taking stuff because it says they lost their property. But I want to say this for certain. Notice what it says right here. And accepted joyfully the seizure of your property. If somebody came to take your stuff, would you say, here, there's the keys. Can I help you move the stuff out? I'll pay for your U-Haul. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll be very transparent. I don't know if it's a sin, but I would have a hard time. Joe personally would have a hard time. You can have my house, but to say I'd like that would be tough for me. I'll just be very honest with you. I don't know about for you, but it's the things that make you think. So they're being worn down here, and so they're just being asked to endure, right? 35, 36. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done all the will of God, you may receive what was promised. Okay? Consider a marathon, 26 miles. Can you imagine you go 26 miles running? I couldn't go 26 yards. 26 miles. And guess what? Right when you get to the end, oh, that's rough, isn't it? Ooh. I don't know why people are running in black suits and ties, but that's what the picture was. Okay? So, and another thing, these guys are sweating. What are you supposed to do? What should those three people be doing? They should be over there picking the other guy up to help him get across. Don't fall short is what he's sort of talking about. So, and if you look at 37 and 38, for in a little while he is coming will come and do not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith. And if he shrinks back, if he quits, if he doesn't endure, my soul has no pleasure in him. That doesn't sound too good. So what's the point? This comes out of Habakkuk, and he's talking about the Jews that they were talking about then, and you can look at it. I think it's Habakkuk 2, 3 through 4. He's saying you're the same people. You're the same people. He keeps lifting stuff out of the Old Testament and bringing it in here. So the point is, so just like the Jews died then, you're up on the chopping block too. You're willfully sinning. But what he's saying is, let's have confidence. Don't let go. And 39, verse 39. But we are not among those who shrink back. Sort of what Dave was saying. But we. He's not saying I or us guys over here. We are not among those who shrink back to destruction, but those who have faith for the safekeeping of the soul. So don't go back. There's nothing to go back to. That's destruction. We don't quit, and you don't quit. We will endure. And we want you all to endure too. So, last slide. So Sunday on the 8th, be looking at Hebrews 11, 1 through 22. Thank you very much for your patience.